A suicide bomber has killed 4 security officers and injured 5 others near one of Islam's holiest sites in the Saudi city of Medina. The bomber detonated his explosives after being stopped outside the Prophet's mosque, a statement said. This mosque is thought to be the burial place of the Prophet Muhammad, and Medina is arguably the holiest city in Islam after Mecca. Suicide blasts also struck 2 other Saudi cities yesterday, making this the 3rd suicide attack in Saudi Arabia over the weekend, and suspicion is quickly falling on the Islamic State. Al Arabiya gave a slightly different account of the incident, saying that the bomber was targeting security officers by pretending he wanted to break his Ramadan fast with them. Qari Ziad Patel, who's a 36-year-old from South Africa, was in the mosque at the time, told the Associated Press news agency that people had at first thought this was the sound of cannon fire, marking the breaking of the fast. Lewis, do you think maybe it's a good idea not to traditionally fire a cannon to celebrate the breaking of the fast? Just maybe it might have prevented some confusion in this case?
Were there cannons when Ramadan was instituted?
Well, no.
Yeah, so maybe it's not necessary. Yeah, okay.
A suspected suicide bomber also died after detonating a device near the U.S. consulate in the city of Jeddah in the early hours of Monday. 2 security officers were slightly injured. No one else was hurt. And then earlier, an explosion went off in Qatif, apparently targeting a Shia mosque. The attacker was killed, but no other casualties. Like the attack in Istanbul's Ataturk airport last week, this is another attack by Muslims, killing and injuring mostly Muslims. And this really does tell us, Lewis, we often get criticized for being Islamophobic because we say, hey, there's a dangerously high portion of Muslims who believe A, B, C, D, whatever. We're just repeating the numbers from studies that we didn't do when we talk about that. But the reality, of course, is that the majority of Muslims hate ISIS, right? I mean, obviously most of the West hates them. Most Muslims hate ISIS. Christians and Jews hate ISIS. Al-Qaeda doesn't get along with ISIS. ISIS is, this is evidence of the fact that even within Islam, ISIS is so at odds with what is generally speaking going on that they are going and bombing Muslim holy sites.
Yeah. More proof, and not that I need to tell people this, that a human being can be convinced of anything.
Yeah.
Here we have Muslims being convinced that they should blow themselves up in some of the holiest places in Islam. Amazing.
Now, let's not forget that Saudi Arabia itself also has an unsavory history of destroying holy sites and relics. Wahhabism sees some of these holy sites and relics as possibly being worshipped and thus being examples of idolatry, which would be blasphemous. ISIS is, of course, a much more extreme version of Wahhabism than the sort of Saudi Orthodox, but let's not pretend that there's no history of destruction of Islamic holy sites and relics in Saudi Arabia, because there actually is. And in order to really understand ISIS, it's important, Lewis, to have an understanding of Wahhabism. And increasingly people actually do. More and more people in our audience email me, and they seem to have been doing more and more research into the origins of Wahhabism and understanding this sort of unique, effectively state religion that exists in Saudi Arabia, still different than ISIS, but important to understand.
And that understanding is only going to go so far with ISIS.
Yeah.
When you learn that they kill people for watching soccer,
Yeah.
you realize that it has mutated and transformed quite a bit.
After the break, I'm going to speak to theoretical physicist Sean Carroll. Tons of people saying, David, you should really interview Sean Carroll, and we're going to do exactly that next. Gamefly is sort of like Netflix for video games. They have over 8,000 new and classic games for Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS4, PS3, Wii, and a bunch of other platforms. And you can play as many games as you want for one monthly fee. And if you find some games you want to keep, you can buy them for a low used price. There's never any due dates or late fees. And our audience can get a free 30-day trial at gameflyoffer.com/TDPS. The games are shipped directly to you with return envelopes included. There's no contracts, and you can rent games through the mobile app. Get the free 30-day trial for the David Pakman Show audience and support our show. by going to gameflyoffer.com/TDPS.